with these guys has been really good.
We want to thank Coach Krzyzewski for joining us here in the main interview room. Coach will be back with us tomorrow for a period before his team gets up on the court.
Best of luck with the next one.
Thank you, Coach. News conference with NCAA President Dr. Mark Emmert is next right here in this room. It's scheduled to begin in 3 or 4 minutes. Where did the time go today?
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll start out with comments from President Emmert, followed by comments from Dan Gavitt, and then we'll open it up to questions. President Emmert.
Well, thanks, Bob. First of all, it's good to be with everybody in three-dimensional space. We've been nearly 3 years since we got to do a tournament in a normal fashion with normal fan bases, and it's been wonderful to see everything work out the way that it is right now. We're set up, obviously, for an extraordinary Final Four. The tournament to date has been remarkable, and I'll have Dan talk a little bit about the tournament and how it's gone so far and what we can look forward to. I wanted to make a couple of comments, not just about basketball, but also about where we are in college sports overall, and then we can turn to some questions when we're finished. So first of all, I think it's critical to note that we're in an extraordinary moment in the history of college sports. We've had, over the past 24, 36 months, setting aside the great challenges of COVID, we've seen enormous movement in the political landscape, in the legal landscape, in the social and economic landscape, all of which has had pretty significant impacts on college sports, society in general, and college sports in particular. We've now got about 9 years of experience under our belt around name, image, and likeness, and are seeing how that's working. We've got, of course, a lot of new experiences around the transfer rules and the opportunities that's provided students. We've seen 35 or so states pass NIL bills. We've seen Congress be engaged in a variety of ways around college sports and continuing even today with a number of activities there. And we've also had a series of legal actions, most notably, of course, the Supreme Court decision in the Alston case, all of which is providing an inflection point that the schools and the national office are using to make pretty dramatic transformations in what college sports is and how it operates. The beginnings of about this time last year, after the tournament, I and some of my board members sat down and we talked about the need for making more than just incremental change. We agreed that what was needed was a constitutional convention, and we went forth and did that, and a really, really good, hardworking group of people came forward last fall, as all of you know, and produced a draft constitution that the membership put in place. What that constitution really does, most fundamentally, is it lays the groundwork for change that can now occur within the three divisions. So in Division 1, where the largest amount of change is likely to occur, there's now a team of individuals representing all of Division 1 and providing experiences from commissioners and ADs and students and athletic directors, faculty reps, et cetera, are all working together to make some core determinations about what it is that Division I stands for, what it is that holds the division together, what are those elements of college sports that are fundamental to the continuation of sports. And they're going to be bringing forward recommendations in the relative near future to the rest of the division to vote on and to help provide the leverage needed to adapt to the new and ever-changing environment. And that's nerve-wracking and angst-filled, but at the same time, it's also very exciting, and I think it's going to provide some key opportunities for students. And at the end of the day, that's the single most important thing here. Why that's especially relevant today here on the eve of another Final Four is that the men's basketball tournament and the women's basketball tournaments have really become these iconic events in American culture. They are, in many people's minds, what college sports always has been and always should be about. The games that we've all enjoyed over the past few weeks have been extraordinary. I mean, it's been a really remarkable tournament with every kind of upset and every kind of outcome that you could imagine. It's been fabulous to have full stands and cheering fans and all the engagement that we get around the tournament. And so as we're thinking about and as the schools are debating and discussing how they want to move forward from this point on, it's great to be able to just hold up the tournament and say, well, we want to make sure that we continue this kind of competitive engagement, this kind of opportunity for students, this kind of a chance to go out and demonstrate your skill and your prowess around your school and in your engagement with your school, and everyone knows it when they see it. And so it's an appropriate time to have that conversation, and we can answer questions about it as we go forward. But before we do, I want Dan to talk about the state of basketball right now and where we are with this tournament. Again, because it's been a remarkable one, and it's so great to be back to something that looks and feels like normal. So, Dan?
Thanks, Mark. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. Just a couple of thank yous to start here. I wanted to thank Tom Burnett, the chair of the men's basketball committee, and his colleagues, most of them are sitting over here, for their exceptional work on setting up a great tournament. Also want to thank our host institutions here in New Orleans, University of New Orleans and Tulane University, the New Orleans Local Organizing Committee, the New Orleans Sports Foundation as well. And I want to thank Joanne Scott and all the NCAA staff that worked to put on this great event. It's just great to be back in New Orleans after a decade. This has been a memorable place for the men's Final Four, and I have no doubt that it will continue this year. As Mark said, it's been a joy to have the pageantry of March Madness back, with fans, with cheer squads and mascots even keeping it light. To have the teams be able to compete in 14 different locations across the country, to do it in a less restricted way than we had to do it last year in a controlled environment, to not be subject to testing, to be able to have that experience with their family and friends, it's just been so joyful. And whether it's from St. Peter's Cinderella run to this Blue Blood Final Four, it's just been an incredible tournament. Some numbers to back that up. Attendance has been incredible. Sold out the first 4 nights in Dayton, both nights, all the way through to selling out all 4 regionals, 17,000 plus in San Antonio and San Francisco, where we were for the first time, 20,000 plus in Philadelphia and Chicago. And we're expecting, it is a sold-out Final Four, 71,500 expected. There are some still tickets available by ticket exchange and by our hospitality packages, but we are pre-sold out, and that's a pretty remarkable feat as well. We've had incredible engagement as well, even outside of the attendance. But I also want to note the women's championship has also had that kind of attendance. We broke a record this year for first and second round attendance on campus sites for first and second rounds, and likely a sellout in Minneapolis for the women's Final Four as well. So March Madness for All has been a really great thing. Our social channels at March Madness MBB for the men's championship have delivered the most engaged tournament ever. To date, March Madness Live has attracted the largest audience in its history, narrowly beating out 2019. In that case, there are 11.4 million unique users of March Madness Live, which already beats any other tournament before we even get to the last 3 games of this tournament. And TV ratings have been very strong as well, averaging 3.8 million viewers across all games headed into the Final Four, which is up pretty significantly from last year's COVID kind of shifted event, but also just down 1% from 2019, which was 3 years ago, as we all know, the last time we did this in any kind of normal fashion, and up 7% from 2018. So really incredible engagement, not surprising, I guess, given the incredible games we've seen and the competition. And of course, we're excited to hopefully develop and deliver on providing Duke and North Carolina and Kansas and Villanova with lifetime memories here in New Orleans. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll open it up. We have microphones. When it's your turn, please identify yourself and your affiliate.
Dan Wolkin, USA Today. Mark, one of the 4 schools here 2.5 years ago received a notice of allegations with 5 level 1 violations. In the meantime, they have basically given their coach a lifetime contract while this case is still being adjudicated. What does that suggest to you about how your member schools view the enforcement process as it's currently constructed?
Well, first of all, Dan, I'll leave it to the school to make decisions about their coaches' contracts. That's their business, obviously. They can do that as they see fit. The enforcement process that you're referring to, of course, is the cases that came out of the Southern District of New York. Those cases moved into a brand new independent process. I think by anybody's estimation, they've taken way too long. It took 2 years before anything could be done with those cases because of the engagement of the Department of Justice. And so you automatically start out 2 years behind the curve, which is crazy, obviously. And then it's just been really slow in getting through that new independent process that's wound up reinvestigating the entire case. So I think that the work that's going on right now, especially with the Transformation Committee and a group that's working with the membership to try and accelerate the enforcement model, is going to be really important. To me, there's a few things that need to be included in enforcement, and that first it's got to be fair, it's got to be swift, and it's got to not punish the innocent, if you will, those that weren't involved in those activities. And that's where the membership's got to be in all of this as they shape a new process or rebuild the one that's in place. It's fascinating to watch and be a part of a system where the schools themselves are, and they've been doing this for, since the 1950s, so more than 60 years now, where they are holding themselves accountable for following the rules. And how do you craft a model that does all 3 of those things? It's fair and swift, and at the same time goes after the misconduct and not those that weren't involved. And we've seen in that 40, 50-year period a swing of that pendulum back and forth, and we've got to get it in a place that's right. And I don't think there's anybody right now that thinks it is.
Jude Papillon, Tulane Hullabaloo. President Emmert, do you have does the NCAA have any sort of plan for smaller colleges and universities to be able to compete with major schools when it comes to NIL deals?
Well, when it comes to NIL deals, the name, image, and likeness issues are relationships between a student athlete and a third party. And so what they represent in the marketplace is between those 2 entities, and the association doesn't have anything to do with that, nor should it. So if an individual at a small school also happens to be somebody who has a large social media following, they can certainly monetize that and take advantage of it. And in fact, we've seen a lot of those things coming out of the tournament. So that's strictly a market function, as it should be. And I've not heard anything from the schools that suggests they want to try and engage on regulating that. And in fact, they probably can't, even if they wanted to.
Billy Witz with the New York Times.
Hi, Billy.
Mark, how is the failure of the Board of Governors and the NCAA to put in any NIL guidelines in place before last July 1st? How is that impacting, I guess, the circumstances that are at present with just trying to, I guess, come up with some rules that will allow people allow athletes to make money off the use of their NIL, but also, as you've said, not lead to them becoming employees?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as a failure on the boards or the members' behalf. It is unfortunately, and we've talked about this many times, it's unfortunately a circumstance where we've now got 30-plus different states with different laws. We've been working with Congress, and we need to continue to work with Congress to create one single federal landscape so that you can have a regulatory structure in place. And then, of course, we've had a variety of legal actions in the courts around all of it. So those events just completely superseded the ability of the board to put in place the kind of policies that I think everyone would like to see. It has been, and it still is the case, that we have got to have Congress help us find a single legal model by which NIL and other relationships with student athletes can be regulated. And that's going to be a big task. It's obviously hard to get things through Congress right now. It's a very difficult political moment. But I also know that there's many members, both sides of the aisle, both chambers of Congress, that understand the issues and want to help us, and we continue to engage with them, and all of the schools do as well. So until we get that in place, Billy, I think we're in this landscape where it's much harder to determine, first of all, exactly what's going on because the data is not widely available, and then secondarily to determine whether or not the actions are consistent with the policies that are in place.
I think Dana was next.
Dana O'Neill at The Athletic. Mark, Coach Krzyzewski just left here and said that it was asked if he had questions for you, so I guess I'll ask him for them. He sounded slightly disenchanted. He said, my questions would be, where are we going, who is in charge, and what are we doing? I'm just curious, I guess, asking on behalf of Coach Krzyzewski what the answers are to those questions.
Well, in terms of where we are and where we're going, as I started to say in my opening comments, we're at a place of huge disjuncture, if you will, around college sports. We've got a relatively, this is just my opinion, a relatively short window of time during which the schools, especially in Division I, need to decide what they want, and this is where Congress needs to come in as well, what they want the relationship between student athletes and their schools to be, what the governance structures around that can be in the current legal environment, and similarly how the rules and structures at a national level, at a divisional level, at a conference level can be made and should be made. To me, this all means that, and I've said this for a good while now, and as have many others, we've got to have a dramatic decentralization of a lot of the rules. The national rules need to be much more streamlined than they are. They need to focus solely on those things that are critical to the integrity of the games and the conduct of the games, that subdivisions or conferences need to have greater responsibility for establishing many of their own rules and their own processes around some of those boundaries and constraints, and that anything that's done has got to be done in a fashion that focuses on the students and their opportunities, their success as athletes, their successes as students, and their health and well-being. And that's a model that probably will look very different than where we are today. Who's in charge is the same group that's always been in charge, and that's the schools. There's an enormous amount of misunderstanding about what the NCAA is. People speak of the NCAA as if it's some monolithic entity. And as you know, Dana, it's not. It's 1,100 schools that come together and make decisions in a collaborative representative democracy. Those schools always have been in charge, and those schools will be in charge moving forward. And they collectively, with the help of us in the national office, have to make decisions in this new legal context. We also have to help them determine what it is they want to ask from Congress. The legal landscape as it exists today simply will not support and sustain the way college sports is conducted today. And so we need to help change that landscape if people want to continue to see events like this championship being conducted the way it's been conducted this tournament. I think this tournament's put on full display the beauty of college sport, and as has the women's tournament. It's been 2 really great tournaments, 8 really great teams moving forward now, and people love it and they enjoy it. And we gotta then work with the schools and with Congress to make sure that we can continue that. That's the direction that we've got to go, and we've got, again, a relatively short window of time, in my estimate. 1 and 2 years. These decisions have to be made because of the dynamics that are underway right now that are far beyond the control of schools, coaches, ADs, or presidents.
Hey, Mark, Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports, and Dan as well. Mark, in every legal challenge involving compensation, the NCAA's tack has been for years going back, interest will go down, fans will stop coming, ratings will go down. What evidence have you seen of that since July 1st, if any?
Well, first of all, we're always in litigation, Dennis, it seems, and so I'm going to refrain from commenting on anything that involves any ongoing litigation. Clearly, the social and political landscape has shifted pretty significantly in a whole variety of ways over the past 12, 24 months. And so, most importantly, we went through the Alston case, and that too changed the legal landscape. And so we're going to have to, as I just said to Dana, we're going to have to be ready, willing, and able to shift in dramatic ways, not in marginal ways. And when I say we, I mean the schools that make these decisions. Collectively, we've got to sit down and figure out what the appropriate path forward is. There's as I mentioned, there's a Division I Transformation Committee, as you're well aware, that's working on these questions, and they hope to have some answers as early to some of these questions as early as August. But they've got a lot of work in front of them.
Next question.
AP Stedham, WHEP AM and FM, Foley, Alabama. Mark, what's your prognosis of the transfer rule, and has there been any clamoring for a specific change moving forward? And then, Dan, do you think they might tweak this tournament in any way about the women's tournament as well? I don't know if you can answer that.
Well, the one issue I know that is an evergreen issue is transfer rules. So I've been doing this for a little over 12 years now. And in those 12 years, the one thing that everybody asks every year is, when are we going to change the transfer rule? And every time it's changed, they say, well, when are we going to change it back? And that's certainly the case right now, right? Dan and I were just with the Basketball Coaches Association, and we spent a great deal of time about, what are we going to do about the transfer rules. And the only thing that I can say right now is that it's clear that students are getting more opportunities to play. They're getting more freedom of movement in some respects. That's what the committee that put that in place in the NCAA Division I Council put in place, and it's having a positive effect for a lot of those young men and women in their ability to play. Now, what I'm concerned about, and many are concerned about, is what's going to be the academic impact of that, especially around basketball. One of the insufficiently reported, not taking any shots at anybody, but one of the insufficiently noted phenomena of the past decade has been the extraordinary academic success in many sports, but especially basketball, and especially for minority players. The graduation rates have been a stunning success. And I don't want, and I know the coaches don't want, and we sure don't want to have the athletes see that decline. And so there's a close eye on what are going to be the realities of this new transfer environment around students being able to finish their degrees in a timely fashion and go on and lead productive lives, because we know how few of them are going to be professional ball players. So it's a constant point of discussion. I don't expect it to go away anytime soon, and I'll let Dan answer questions about tournaments.
Well, we've already seen some changes in the women's tournament this year, expanding from 64 to 68 teams. Very likely next year we may see a first four at a predetermined site for the women's championship, like we have in Dayton for the men's championship. And next year, a reminder that the women's regionals will go from 4 sites to 2 and be a super regional concept that was put in place just a few years ago. No dramatic changes like that planned at the moment for the men's championship, but we have the men's committee that always works every summer to tweak and improve the experience, improve the tournament, works collaboratively with the women's championship. So no plans at the moment, but we'll always work hard to make it an even better tournament than it is, if possible.
Okay, I think Jeff had next.
Jeff Goodman. Mike Krzyzewski is arguably the greatest coach that's coached this sport. He's told me several times that you've never reached out to him to get his views or thoughts or suggestions on how to improve the sport. Why?
Well, I'm a little disappointed he doesn't remember when I was sitting in his office talking with him about basketball. I've talked to a lot of coaches over a lot of time, and I'm sorry that that Coach K doesn't recall that.
Next question.
Mark, Mitch Gibbs, WGSO Radio. With all the new changes, like you said, with the transfer rule, more freedom, the NIL, is there any thoughts to what would happen with the minimum requirements to play college basketball before entering the NBA draft? I'm just wondering, we've had the one and done for a long time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, as you know, the one and done rule isn't ours; it's the NBA's, and it's a topic that Adam Silver and I and others have talked about for a long, long time. They occasionally, of course, re-engage on that question. It's embedded in their labor contract, so it's not something that we're involved in. We've been providing greater flexibility for our athletes when it comes to going into the tryouts and having an opportunity to come back. Personally, I think that the more opportunity there is for our athletes to get a fair and honest assessment of what their abilities are to get drafted and go into professional ball, the better off they are. They need as much information, honest information, about what those prospects look like, because to me, one of the most frustrating elements of the relationship, and it's more true in basketball than most sports, is when a young man leaves early, goes into the draft, winds up not getting drafted, or winds up going into the G League for a short period of time, or doesn't make any league, and now they're out to sea, and that their talent and their ability as a student isn't realized. And I think there's far too many of those stories, and we need to make sure that student athletes and their families can make really thoughtful decisions, and then that they've got a lot of flexibility in that. I think they should have as much flexibility as we can, while still recognizing the need for clarity about who's on rosters and who's not, and how teams can be formed in an intelligent way. But I've been long an advocate that the NBA, and encourage the NBA to allow athletes to have an opportunity to try out for the NBA and see where they really belong.
Next question.
Hi, Mark. Scott Gleason with USA Today. Yesterday, the governors of Oklahoma and Arizona signed into law bills that will bar transgender athletes from competing on women's teams, including at the college level, Given the non-discrimination policy the NCAA has adopted for its championship hosting and bidding process, what is the association's position on continuing to stage championships in states with these type of laws that cover college sports?
Yeah, as you've seen, there have been a number of states that have done similarly. I think it was Oklahoma yesterday or the day before that passed a similar bill. So let me mention two things. First of all, on the issue of transgender athlete participation, the position that the Board of Governors has taken, the highest body in the NCAA governance system, has been that they want to make sure that there's three core values in higher education and college sports that are honored. And one is that there's an inclusive opportunity for student athletes to participate in college sports. The second, of course, is fairness, that when you get in on a field or in a field of competition, that it's as fair as it can possibly be for all of the participants. And then thirdly, it's got to be done in a way that promotes the health and wellness of those competitors. Striking a balance between all those three things is always challenging, no matter what the topic is. And so where the board wound up in February was continuing to follow the basic model of the Olympic movement, the International Olympic Committee and US OPC, and that is to say there are opportunities for transgendered women to participate in women's sports, for example, but they have to hit certain biomedical guidelines. And those guidelines now are varying at the federal level and at the national level and at the international level by sport. The IOC changed that policy in 19 and 20. The individual federations, sport federations, are now putting into place their individual guidelines. And our board said, essentially, those will be our default options, but we also want to reserve the ability to accept or not accept those standards based upon the advice of our own medical advisors and the Committee for Medical Aspects of Aspects of Sport. And so they have a set of guidelines that allow for competition, but trying to make sure that it's fair. Understand the debate around that completely. It's a very difficult, very challenging issue that nobody's hit perfectly right now. When it comes to then saying, okay, how do we want that to affect our participation or our hosting of events in various states or locales, what's in place right now is a survey process by which when a city or a community wants to host an event, they have to be able to explain how it is that they're going to make sure that the participants in that sport will be allowed to do that in a non-discriminatory way. And so in any of the states that you're talking about, if a school, for example, is hosting a championship event, and they need to be able to explain, here's how we will be able to conduct this with these participants in this site without any difficulties. And if they can do that, then we'll be in those states.
We have time for one more question. Mike DeCourcy.
All right, Mike. Oh, there you are.
Thank you. Mike DeCourcy from Sporting News. Mark, this is our first opportunity since the Alston decision to ask you really anything. And so what I wanted to find out was the process behind taking the case all the way to the Supreme Court, to what the value in it was for the NCAA, who makes those decisions? Is it you? Is it the board? And then ultimately, did losing that decision in the way that you did, has it impacted the way the NCAA wants to operate and do business?
Well, if I may, let me answer it in a bit of reverse order. So nobody's going to ever describe losing a Supreme Court case 9-zip as a win. It certainly isn't. But on the other hand, what the case did do is it provided greater clarity on what the legal landscape is. And in that sense, it's been incredibly useful because it takes away some of the guesswork in what that environment looks like. Because since don't want to get geeked out on legal cases, but since Board of Regents back in '83, it's been one thing. It's been debated in multiple cases at the federal level and even at the state level as to what that landscape looks like. And now the Supreme Court has laid down a marker on one set of those issues. And so it has allowed the association, the school, by that I mean the schools and conferences, to sit down and say, okay, if we now know what the world looks like, now how do we want to organize and operate, and what makes sense in that legal landscape to be a national rule that can be settled via the NCAA, what parts need to be delegated to individual schools, what parts need to be delegated to conferences, and starting to sort that out. And I think while that's very difficult, Mike, in the sense that those are hard conversations, they're the necessary conversations, and we're seeing the beginnings of some really good debate and discussion about how that's going to move forward. In terms of the legal strategy there, we were coming out of the Alston case in limbo as to what really did that ruling mean, and does it have standing, because it was, from a non-lawyerly perspective, inconsistent with a whole variety of other cases, and it was consistent with some others. That's the reason the Supreme Court picked it up, was because there was that clear conflict between cases that had been settled. And it's, of course, very rare that they take a case up, and it's because it was unsettled. So the decisions around those things are made by the board. I don't have the authority, and nor should I have the authority to say, okay, fine, we're going to go appeal to the Supreme Court. That's a decision that's made in debate and discussion with the board. In this particular case, it involved the other plaintiffs, which included a number of conferences. So it was the conference lawyers, the NCAA lawyers, and our external lawyers all sitting down and making a decision, and then working with the Board of Governors of the NCAA to move forward on it. And again, while I would have much preferred that we won that case, and I still believe that our legal arguments were really sound, nonetheless, some of that law is now settled law, and we can move forward. And we also know the places where we need the help of Congress, where we can now say, okay, look, if you, Congress, want college sports to continue in these fashions over here, we need your help and your assistance to do that. And that provides a little more vision and throughsight into what we can and need to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all.